Welcome to Peer Check. I'm your host, Adam Keating, and today we're talking about why engineering leaders should look at KPIs in the same way that business leaders do. My guest today is Niru Somayajula, the president and CEO of SensorTech. She's a second-generation owner of the company, technical background, absolutely brilliant business mind, family-first person that's coming in here and saying, how do we actually take what's worked in the business world and bring that into the engineering org and marry the two together? Niru, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
I'm really interested. You started in technical background,
Yep.
and now you're running a company.
Yep.
How did you first get into tech, and why make the shift?
I didn't have a choice. So my parents, both technical, immigrants from India, and very keen on me being a professional. And so I had a choice of engineering or medicine or law. That was it. That's all I was allowed to pursue. Biology is not my thing, and legal stuff not my thing either. So it was engineering, and so I applied to lots of engineering schools out of high school. They forced me to take tech classes in high school. I was like that girl in tech classes, and I loved it. So what do you do? So I ended up in engineering, and then I got kicked out of engineering because I was, software engineering wasn't my thing. And I ended up switching into geophysics. So that's where, rock acoustics, I guess, and spent my time in university learning about rocks and how they're formed and the acoustic properties and how, all of that. So.
That's awesome. It sounds like our parents had the same philosophy. I was also given the same ultimatum early on, and maybe it led me here too. Tell me about how you got into the business though. So like the technical side, that's a big jump, and I know it was in the family, but still, how do you make that jump, and what's it like running a business today on a very technical product?
Yeah, so I had actually, when I left small town Ontario, went to university, I had zero intentions of ever coming back to work for the family business. I wanted to go as far away as possible, travel the world. And one of my internships during my schooling was to work for an oil and gas company in France. And it kind of opened up my world to what offshore life might be like as an engineer or a technical person. And so I went to grad school, and while I was there, my parents actually were getting ready to sell the business to the same oil and gas company that I had interned with a couple of years, big multinational. And they said, well, we need a transition team and to come in and help transition out their current management, my parents and their partner, to a new team that would get absorbed up into this multinational. And then we'd be free to kind of get absorbed within the company and move careers or do whatever, really. How do you pass up an offer like that, right? And so my fiance at the time, an industrial engineer, myself, I brought in a second cousin that worked for British Petroleum in Chicago, who was interested in moving to Canada. The three of us formed a new management team, took over the business, and then partway through the 3-year transition, the deal fell apart. Oil and gas had tanked. The buyers weren't doing any more M&A. And so the deal kind of died, and I had fallen in love with the business. I never thought I would move back to small town Ontario. And I was a manager, I was operations manager during that time, and the deal had fallen apart, and my parents were already transitioning out. So they didn't really want to be transitioned back into the business. So the three of us decided to buy the business. Yeah. About 11 years ago now.
Wow. All right. You're giving me goosebumps. I didn't know that part of this story. That's incredible. Yeah. So 11 years, obviously, like before we even go beyond that, when you made the choice to buy the business, what was like the thought process there? I imagine the passion was like the part making you grip on this and say, maybe I'm scared, maybe I'm nervous, but I got to do this. Like, what was the thinking process to go from like, what felt like a fairly reasonable transition with a big company to, okay, let's go out on our own, very scary, taking over family business. How did you make that decision?
I don't know. I was pregnant at the time, so I'm not sure if that helped it or hurt it, to be honest. I think, I've been working unofficially in the business since I was 3 years old, like all my memories are in this business, and the thought of it going to somebody else just, at that point didn't suit. I was just, how could I leave this to somebody else? This is my legacy. This is my family history. I've got two great partners that are super technical, which allowed me to focus on the business side, which, worked out really great at the time. And I was like, why not? What do we got to lose? And you're young and, you don't know any better, maybe. And I had help. Like, my parents weren't going anywhere. They were going to be grandparents fairly soon, but they're still in town. They're available to help. And I knew if I needed something, they'd be around. And so I think we just took the leap of faith that we had what it would take to keep it going. 15 years later, we're still doing it. So it's not so bad.
That's absolutely incredible. I'll come back to today's state in a little bit. I want to dive into one piece just on the technical front before we get into KPIs and how do you think about running a business that has a very technical product. My question for you is, having that technical background, albeit maybe software wasn't the thing for you, but having the geophysics background, having like the technical just like brain, what do you think that's meant for you as a business leader? What has it allowed you to do that you think you might have struggled with otherwise?
Oh, one, it's credibility. So often when I'm trying to sell products to a customer, I'm talking to their engineering team first. Mm-hmm. I don't talk to senior management always. I'm often talking to an engineer that has a problem that they're trying to solve, and everything we do is custom. And so we're problem solvers, just like you, right? And so you have to talk on their level, and me having the background in geophysics and all the internships that I did. And I think it gives me some sense of credibility. And then I can very quickly, at least understand what they're trying to do and then pass them off to my very smart people that end up taking over. And then I deal on the commercial side. But I think it gets me the foot in the door because we are still small. We're considered a pretty small business. And so working with some of the big giants that we do in both defense and oil and gas, you've got to find a way to relate. And that background helps, I think, a lot.
How big is the team? How big is the team today?
I want to say we're about 45.
Nice.
Roughly.
Nice. And what are like the custom solutions, like getting there, those engineers and teams, like where are you spending most of your time today on like the custom development front?
I'm doing most of my side on the BD side. So I'm spending it developing the relationships with new companies that could use what we're making, developing the relationships, all of our expansion. I tend to spend a lot of my time and figuring out where the next step is going to be on that side as well, and bringing in the right team to help actually execute on all the product ideas that I kind of come up with.
That's awesome. And like, you didn't do an MBA. Like, so how did you become the business leader? Like, what did you do to make that transition?
So there were three of us when we took over the business, and replacing three. My dad was really, really technical. He was the CEO in the business. He was super, super technical. He did most of our product design. They had a VP of ops that kind of helped run the production. My mom was very much on the financial side. So she did a lot of the hiring, the firing, and she managed all the finances. And so, when I was brought in as a technical person because that's, what I was trained to be doing. But when we got into the process of due diligence and taking over the business, my mom pulled me aside and she's like, the person that runs the business is the one that manages the finances. And that was her advice to me at the time, even though, my dad's pulling me towards technical stuff. She's like, you gotta run the finances if you want to run the business, if that's the role that you want. And so I kind of took that advice. I helped her assemble tax returns at the end of the year, which is the school of hard knocks. Definitely not an MBA. She taught me a little bit. We had really good accountants. I think I ended up switching our accountants to ones that could actually teach me. And to be able to educate me on the things I needed to know to be able to run the business without getting into the weeds of every penny. I'm still very much not a penny person, but I still look at the bank accounts, 3 times a week. That's what I do.
It's an interesting, I think there's lots of engineering managers, directors, VPs out there who don't quite have the experience that you've had where you actually get to take over a company, right? That obviously, it's your baby. You need to make sure you don't run out of money. You need to make sure that you're hitting targets. Like, you don't have another choice. But the hindsight of understanding the financial implications when you look at other goals and KPIs, it's so much context. It's not just we're trying to deliver to market a certain time or hit a certain budget, there's a reason you're going for those numbers. And I think that's missed a lot for traditional manager, director, VP roles, because the companies are usually huge, right?
Yeah,
they don't really know how it rolls back. So like, how do you think about communicating that to your team? Like taking what you know on the financial statement side and how the dollars and cents got to add up. How do you communicate that to your other leaders and the rest of the group to say, we've set a goal. Here's why. Like, here's why it matters. So I think a lot of times that's missing. A lot of companies that's not there. I even struggle with it sometimes. But like, what's your approach to kind of bringing the team along for the journey?
As of late, my senior leadership team actually gets probably 80% of the profit loss statements now. And so they see direct impact. So they're seeing the revenue. And we have revenue targets as part of our KPIs, but also they see, the impacts of hiring. You hire 5 engineers. It's really different than 5 other workers. It's just, they see how one affects the other. And so I think having them be part of it, which is new for us, it's historically always been just me. And so that piece doesn't translate really well. Now that the senior leadership team sees all of that, I think they have a bigger appreciation for why I push on certain things, why we need to get this product to market, why we can't book the bigger booth at the trade show, right? We don't want to spend $50,000. We want to spend 5. And this is why, because we've got all of these other costs and how much we spend on hydro. It's like, we got to turn the lights off at the end of the day because you see the impact. I think them being able to see some of that, it hits home.
Did you start sharing the P&L for that purpose, for transparency and buy-in and the rest? Was that sort of motivation?
Yeah, I have a head of operations in Ontario and then my GM here in Nova Scotia, and then my product design lead in Nova Scotia as well. And I just couldn't be running everything. It's too much. And especially when I'm trying to work on what's happening 5 years out or 10 years out. I can't be in the weeds of like, why did we spend so much on one thing, right? And so having them take ownership over that. And so my head of ops in Ontario manages the Ontario P&L. Then there's a P&L for Nova Scotia. And so having them sort of own that part of it, not looking at equipment assets and amortization, he'll handle any of that. Bank interest and all of that kind of stuff they don't look at. But everything else, they've got direct impact over. So now they manage it and it's part of their responsibility.
It's really interesting, actually. We're going through the exact same thing right now. We went from 35 people to 80 people in the last 6 months. And it's been like, went from a very small team where, the only number we were worrying about financially was revenue and how much runway did we have, really. That was like truthfully the numbers we looked at too. Now we're trying to build like truly a SaaS company that grows and scales, and we think about burn and how it all fits together and all the things you're talking about. And we're about to do the exact same thing after just bringing in our VP finance to say, how do we give better? We've always shared the high level numbers, always. Everyone's always known, how much runway we had, what our burn rate was and all the rest, but not able to tie it back to their job. Like it was always just too complicated. But now we're about to do the same thing, which I think it's exciting to hear you've just done that. What do you do with that now? In terms of goal setting, we talked a bunch about KPIs, setting goals before. How do you take those revenue targets and like the constraints of the budget and actually set goals for your company today?
Yeah, so I don't know, actually, I was about to say it's traditional, but I don't know if what we do is traditional at all because I have, no corporate experience outside of sensor tech. But so every person that's non-production in the business has a KPI associated with them. So whether it's on the operations side and production, whether it's accounting, whether it's business development, sales, marketing, every person in the company, aside from production, because they have their own targets, has a KPI. Aside from that, what we set are OKRs, so objectives and key results. And that's what I consider our stretch goals. And those feed up into sort of what I set over as our strategic goals for the company. So every year, usually with the leadership team, we come up with sort of 3 or 5 big goals that the company's trying to hit. And every person has to create a stretch goal that isn't tied to compensation or their annual review. So I don't want them to be feeling like they're constrained and their job is dependent on this stretch goal. I want their KPIs to be how they're evaluated at year end, but their OKRs are really how they're helping push the company forward. And so we have 2 separate ones.
That's interesting. We also use OKRs. We've probably done less of a good job of doing individual KPIs, mostly because it's been really difficult with like most of our team being technical on development side, and it's not really. We can talk about on-time delivery, but it's been trickier. So we're doing like more on a project by project basis type of thing. But
Yeah.
I'm curious on the OKR front. How are you managing the two of those together? Because I see a lot of companies struggle with focus. How are you managing the OKRs when you combine in the fact that individuals have their KPIs? How do they think about that, I guess, as a team?
Well, and then we phased them in. And I think that maybe was part of our success is we started with KPIs. OKRs were something that came later on. And we started with, 5 KPIs for the company, your basics, on-time shipping, revenue goals, really basic, the number of RMAs that we get, the things that I thought were most important. And that's ballooned now to, 30 or 40 KPIs across the company. OKRs are something that we brought in probably a couple of years later. So everyone is really entrenched in the KPI format, which is all still Excel spreadsheets for us. We've not found a really elegant way of managing all of that other than through an Excel spreadsheet that everyone fills out once a month. On the OKR side, we use Asana to track all of ours. And so I set the strategic goals usually, just early in the new year. And everyone gets sort of 30 days to figure out what their 90-day plan looks like to support one of the 5 main company-wide goals and how they fit in, what that looks like.
Can you give me an example, and you can generalize it if you want, of like an OKR and a semi-related KPI, like what the difference is in your lens?
Yeah, so let's maybe on the marketing side, that's a good one. So one of our main strategic goals was, building brand awareness. And so we rebranded, I think in October of last year. And how does that roll out? And so we have a marketing plan that's associated with it. And so Noah, who's my marketing manager, has a pretty intense set of OKRs of how we make sure our brand is getting out into the market and people understand it and interact with it. But on the KPI side, it's very much the analytics of, how many Twitter followers do we have? And how many impressions did we get on certain clicks? And, how many interactions did we have on this LinkedIn post? And so all of that. So that's how the real numbers and the meatiness of the analytics come out on the KPI side, where the OKR side is really we want to target 10% more or 50% more or, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like that because I've seen it before, like in a pyramid of how people have KPIs. There might be 50 KPIs, and you've got a couple that are your North Star that you communicate to everybody, and then you have supporting KPIs. And I think OKRs fit in a little bit like that because you've got an objective, which yours is brand awareness. You then dive into a key result, which might be 50% of your revenue comes from marketing or whatever it might be. And then your KPIs are obviously, yes, we have twice as many followers on social media, or we've got so much engagement on whatever. And I think it's really important, both for business leader and an engineering leader, because that tying from top to bottom is a struggle. It really is a struggle. And what I see in engineering orgs is oftentimes it's, hey, we're trying to get a product to market in whatever, say it's automotive, 54 months. And here's a bunch of stuff to track. And then they have no idea really, like, truthfully, if they're on track outside of a schedule that was developed. And the thing that I think is scariest about that is that schedule now, in truthful, like 2022 and where we're going, is soon going to need to be 40 months and 30 months. And we're getting complacent with just tracking, like, are we in the right place? Not, are we doing the effective thing? Because there's no easy way to know. There's no good way to know, right? What does Asana look like for you? Like, how are you using Asana to track the OKRs? Are you guys setting up? Just like walk me through the technical setup, because I think for most people, we've used Lattice, we've actually used Notion. Like, how are you setting it up in Asana and assigning ownership? Like, just talk me through sort of logistics of that.
Yeah, so I'll start with, there's a goals section in Asana. So I think you need to be like a premium user for that to kick in. Historically, we only used Asana for project management. So for all the sort of product development things or process improvements, we just had it sort of department by department, project by project. And then we kicked in goals last year. And this year was when it was absolutely necessary. It was part of job description that you had to go into Asana. And so I go in and I start with the 5 top level goals for the company. And then everyone fits in their objectives and then their key results under one of those 5. So everything that they're working on has to fit in under one of those 5. Otherwise, for me, it's not effective use of their time to pushing the company forward. And so people have to put in their own, and then they have to update their own. And so I do a quarterly review with all of my direct reports, and everyone actually has a quarterly review done just to review, did you stay on track? Did you get done what you thought you were going to be able to get done? If not, why? And if not, what are you focusing on? One of the things that I've been talking about a lot with my senior leadership team is our 80-20. It's like, where are you spending 80% of your time for the next month or the next quarter? And I try to work in 30 or 90-day blocks because I can't seem to think beyond that, individually anyways. And so my 80-20 for the first quarter was really to focus on BD. But just with COVID and not being able to travel and do trade shows, the BD is hard. It's really hard. At least it was for us. And so for me, my 80-20 was to focus on getting the BD back up and running the way I wanted it to be run. My head of ops, her 90-day focus was on quality audits. We have an ISO audit coming up. And so she needed to focus her 80% on that. And that helps also keep us on track. It's like, this is what my 80-20 is, because everything else is then a filter. That's also transparent. So all of our OKRs, all of our KPIs, 100% transparent across the whole company. So people should be able to know if they look at yours, to be like, this is her focus. And so if she's not responding about all these other things that I've thrown on her list, this is why.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the keys, if you go through and listen to some of the books, like John Doerr talks about OKRs, like one of the key things is that they have to be public, because if they're not, it's the easiest thing in the world to change. People don't communicate well. You don't know how they fit together. Like, there's a bunch of problems there that kind of stem from that. Is the team responsible for updating these on a cadence? Like, what is the cadence in which you look at sort of performance there? Is it still quarterly, or do you folks do this weekly and then you have a meeting quarterly and go through it? What's sort of like the reporting cadence for keeping on track?
For KPIs, it's monthly. And for OKRs, it's monthly and quarterly. So we don't get down to the weekly, bi-weekly. I find monthly is enough for us. That might change with time, but that's generally the cadence that we're working off of.
We've done a really interesting thing the last little while. We hired a VP of marketing, MJ, and she brought in this like new format for running weekly or monthly meetings. And the first 5 minutes really is a highlight of wins and challenges. But then it's to take stock on your OKRs, and you're only allowed to share whether it's on track or off track, and no commentary. And the whole point then is that the ones that are on track, move past, go to the next thing. The ones that are off track, there's a section down below where the whole time people are giving their update for the first 5, people are adding their ideas of identifying challenges or identifying questions or things to explore. And using that then to focus the next 55 minutes of that meeting. Say if there's 10 things that came out of it, you might pick 4 of them, and that becomes the focus of the meeting. It's been really impactful. We've only started doing it the last 3 weeks, but it's been a huge performance improvement for us actually talking about the hard stuff, and like also just like focusing on the parts that are key. So could be a cool thing with Asana, because I know Asana is so visual and like you can see very clearly how things are going. But anyway, it's something that happened for us recently. I was like, oh man, this is amazing. So
I might have to steal that idea. It's good. No, Asana is great. But like anything, right? It's garbage in equals garbage out. And so if people aren't updating it, you don't get any information out of it. And so when I'm on the road, I'm not getting updates and things. It's because people aren't in the habit of using it. And that's something that we've been really focused on, and not just on the project management side, but even on the production side, is people need to be logging their hours on, and we're not trying to monitor whether they worked an 8-hour day or not. I need how long they spent on this process so that I know how to cost it for future jobs. Right. And so that data is really, really important when we're trying to cost new things and know if we're losing money on something where we shouldn't be, or we didn't cost it right. It's just trying to get that idea across that the data that you put in is really useful for what comes out and how you work with it. And it's not necessarily going to, impact your job, right?
Well, one thing that you and I talked a bit about before was that one of the hardest part of KPIs and any set of goals is understanding how to predict if it's going to happen or not. Because a lot of times the goal is really a lag measure. engineering in particular, I think, struggles super hard with this. It's like the goal is to deliver a car to market in 54 months. That is like the most lag measure if there was ever one, because that's a yes or a no, and it's very black and white. There's a bajillion things that can fit into if that's going to happen or not, but there are some good indicators. How did you think about lead and lag indicators? Because I find businesses almost do a bit of a stronger job here. And I want to dive into, what can we take from that to help engineering teams also similarly be more productive that way?
I was thinking about this. So most of our KPIs are lagging KPIs. The leading ones, I would say, are very much on the sales, marketing, BD side. Is how many opportunities are you generating? What's the split of the quotes that you're doing? Because we have different business lines, right? And so we're quoting from different ones, and we try to do it based on capacity, and that would very much be the leading side of it. And then everything else, I would say, on the production side is a lag, and things that we're measuring, like on-time delivery is easy, but also what's our profit loss, for sure, off of budget. Things like scrap, how much are we scrapping? How good are our yields? That talks about our process and how well that is. We used to measure things like machine uptime. Are we maintaining our machines? So it's usually a lag that feeds into an improvement down the road. Yeah. But
it's tricky, because I think the on-time delivery, quality, overall budget, like they're very much the KPIs that engineering leaders look at for their business unit. And most times it's the same problem, right? You really don't fully know outside of looking at a very complex schedule. Whereas if you look at sales, like if we're talking about your exact example or BD, revenue might be the lag or the ultimate goal. You can look at sales qualified leads, pipeline, something else, and have a pretty good prediction over time if you're going to hit that goal based on how everything else is going. It's not the same in engineering. It always leads into this like massive crunch, surprises at the end, and it's really tricky. And it's one of the things that we're actually trying to figure out as a company is how do we give teams better insight as to what's going to happen? Because it's really, really hard to know right now. Because like you just said, even on the quality front or scrap rate, there's definitely ways to predict if that's going to be good or bad when you're doing the actual design work. And it's like, I think there's a real opportunity on the engineering front to get that part right for sure.
Yeah. Something that I'd like to incorporate, like the PDRs and the CDRs, if you're doing those design reviews, and if you had a metric around those design reviews, I think that would impact, and that would be definitely like a leading indicator of what might happen on quality side or RMAs. Like if you didn't do those and you didn't do it in a timely fashion, or your customer's pushing to get a product before you finish development, what's the effect, right?
Yeah, we're actually literally working on this right now, because we pull data for customers sort of manually today. We haven't built out sort of the other side is to see it in a beautiful way, the same way if you're doing sales and you use Gong and it's telling you, well, you spoke too long on this phone call, which means the customer's probably upset, which means you're probably not going to win. Like they've got the whole thing figured out. We're early innings, but we're starting to get some really interesting insight, because I'll give you two examples of a company. One, we could see turn around a design review of a drawing, multiple versions in the same calendar day, every single time across the entire org. The other put data in Colab that remained current for 60 days before they actually finished the design review. And if I don't have to do a whole lot of math to realize which one of those two companies is likely going to deliver on time, because there's just such a difference in effectiveness and agility there. And that's one of the things, like you said, PDR, CDR, like we're thinking it's a combination of time, anticipation, how much is actually found ahead of time. I think one of the interesting lead indicators you see in the software world is what percentage of bugs are you catching upstream of release, and then what are you getting after? Same way for scrap, right? Pretty easy to tell what percentage of problems are you catching before their change orders. Very similar type of conversation. Don't know the answer to all this yet. Still
no, neither do I.
I think it's an important topic though, because the way you run a business, in my opinion, running an engineering org shouldn't be that much different. It's just a different focus, right? You're ultimately trying to achieve it. You're being held accountable to deliver it anyways. So thinking about running an engineering org like you would a business, I think is a strength for leaders.
I agree.
Last question for you. Thinking about the last 11, 15 years, this whole journey, What are you most excited about for Sensor Tech now? Like, what's the next few years looking like? What are you excited for? Kind of give us a bit of the future.
Good question. We've been on a pretty good growth curve the last few years. Some of that definitely attributed to our move to Nova Scotia. Some of it was just timing, I think. We're coming out with some really exciting products kind of towards the end of this year. Products that are a stretch for us. They're, a big part of our stretch goals and our OKRs for the last couple of years is coming out with products that are more than just a component. They're more of a system. And I feel like that gets us into new markets. I'm talking to different types of customers. We're looking at an expansion into the US as well. So nice. That is also something I'm super excited about because it's a whole new market, whole different way of doing business too. And the possibilities, the opportunities are greater, obviously more risk too. But that's stuff that I love doing. So yeah, lots to look forward to.
That's amazing. I've always been following along for a couple of years now, but I'm excited to see the system side of this. Like, I think there's such an opportunity. Like, I'm an engineer by background, and obviously I'm a nerd for anything technical that can be built out. But I think that's a really cool opportunity, especially now the way the economy is shifting. There's so much focus on blue tech, and there's so many things that I think are a huge opportunity here. So that's exciting.
Inshoring, right? Lots of people are talking about bringing stuff back to North America. And we do everything in-house, right? And that's been always and I think that's helped us, right? Working from the component level, we add to that. And so now we're adding a little bit more, and it's a stretch, but starting from the bare fundamentals and working up, I think it works in our favor. So with everyone wanting to buy local, that's good for us. It's great.
That's amazing. On the US front, are you planning to open an office there or just simply start selling into the market?
So we already sell a fair bit into the market. The plan is for an office, whether that's just a sales office or whether it's more. Nova Scotia was supposed to be just a sales office, and now we've got 18 strong here and 2 manufacturing facilities. So who knows?
I'll tell you a cool tool while you're thinking about it. So there's a product called Deal, DEEL. They just actually posted that they went from 1 million to 100 million in recurring revenue in 20 months. 20 months.
That's crazy.
They basically do like all the employer record and hiring for if you're a Canadian company and a US employee or in Europe or wherever. Really, really awesome product. We use it to actually hire our first people in the US to kind of figure out what it might look like to have an office. It's a good tool for, honestly, any company I think to check out. They're gonna hit $1 billion in revenue soon. I think if I measured how many people I've referred them to at this point, it's got to be hundreds. But
you're getting a cut, right?
I should be. I'm going to have to strike a deal here on the commission front. But no, it's a cool company. Went through Y Combinator with us, and honestly, we just happened to use it, and the experience was so good that I've just told everyone about it since. And the timing's perfect too, right? Yeah. You think about COVID and everything else, like timing couldn't have been any better to have been ready to scale. So yeah, if it's something you want to like dabble with before you get all the legal structure set up, it's pretty quick and easy. Saved us a lot of time and trouble. So something to keep in mind.
I'll take a peek. Thanks.
Awesome. Niru, thank you so much for joining today. And I'm really looking forward to seeing these new products come out this year. Good luck with the next little bit, and look forward to catching up with you in person sometime soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Have a good one.